Hi guys, so today we're going to add React hook forms to a React Native project. So this is the React Native project that I already have. It's a basic project with 2 inputs and a button. I also have a switch which would toggle between two optional fields, and these fields would also be based on a value in React hook forms. So we are going to do that. So let us get started. Let us first add React hook forms to our project. To do that we need to do npm install React hook forms or yarn add React hook forms. So that's something which I've already done. Also, if you're going to follow along with my template, the example that I'm using, you'll need to use React Native Tailwind CSS because that's what I'm using for styling my app. But if you're going to style it yourself, you can ignore that. So yes, now that I've installed React hook form, let me import it in our app and let's implement the React hook form functionality. So let's take a look at the docs how to do that. So this is the example for React Native that we have. So it says that we have to use controller for React Native, so that's what we're going to use. We're going to use use form. So use form obviously is the hook that's necessary, whether it's for React Native or you do it for web. But yeah, so we'll also need the controller, and then what we need to do is wrap our input inside of the controller component. So let's see how to do that. So this is how we do it. We have the controller, and then inside it we have the render prop called render, and there we render our text input, right? So that's what we're going to do. We don't need this text input, we have our own text input, so we'll just replace it with that. We don't need styles on blur. We probably need on change text and value, which is something that's going to be required. The others we can avoid for now, we can let it be. And we also have name, we have to give it a name, so we'll just call it name for now. We have rules and we have default value. We are going to need them, but let's not add them now, just to show you how it works. So the same thing we're going to do for email as well. Let me just copy it, and then when I paste, so the placeholder here would be called email, and the field name would also be email. So I can remove the other 2 forms that I have. Okay, it gives me an error. It says control is not defined. Okay, that is because we did not use hook forms. So use form rather, yeah, we need to have control from use form hook that we have. We don't need handle, submit and errors. Okay, we'll need them later, so let's just keep it there. Okay, so that's there. We've got it to work. It says there's an error. It says email is missing default value and so is name. So we'll need to add the default value for both email and name. So the default value, we can have it as an empty string for now, as in it should ideally be an empty string unless you are setting it with the preset value. But yeah, that's not something we are doing. Okay, now when I refresh, it should be fine. Yes, okay, it's fine. We do not have any errors. Okay, so now these 2 fields are wrapped in our controller and they are hooked to React hook forms. I don't think we need on blur, so we are going to remove that as well. Just on change and values are the one that we need. Okay, now let us try to do one thing. We'll try to log this value when we click on submit. Okay, we have a button called submit, so when we click on submit, we will probably need to log these values somewhere. So let's see how we can do something like that. Apply validation. On press, it calls handle submit with the on submit function. So that's what we're going to do with our button as well. So when we say on press, we have handle submit. Handle submit is the one that we had imported from use form. So, and on submit is the function that we'll define in our app. So let us do that. Let us make a function called on submit. It will take the form data, so now when I enter some values for name and email and click on submit, it should show up here. So let me test it if this is how it works. So okay, yeah, that's it. So we have got name and we have got email, and these are the values that I had entered. So that's fine. We have hooked like we have wired up our form inputs to the React hook form library. So now let's add some validation. Suppose we want these fields to be required so that the user cannot click on submit when these fields are not filled, right? So let me add some rules to it. So rules would be, I would say required is true. The same would be for email as well. So when I say required is true, and now when I try to click on it, it still gives me the same data. Is it because I did not refresh it? Yes, might be. Okay, so now the button click is not working, but we need to inform the user that these are the fields that are required and these are the fields that have not been filled. So we'll probably need an error message as well. So there are two ways to do that. One is like we have the rules, we will have errors, and then based on the error we can render a custom text based on what we need, or we can have an error text involved with the rule itself. So I'll show you how that's done. So instead of required true, we'll have value. So the value of required would be true, and message is what we need. So message would be name is required. So the same thing we'll do for email as well. Here we'll say email is required, right? So we need to inform our users that okay, this is these are the fields that are missing. So if we look at the input component that I have, it says it takes a prop called error text and another called error. So when the prop is error, it would just put a red border around it just to notify the user that okay, this field is wrong, and error text would just render out the error message that we have. So that's what we are going to use. So error would be, we already have the errors hook errors value that we are using from use from. So what that does is if there are any errors in your form, this object here would capture it and then you can use it. So this field is called name, right? So this one would be errors.name. So if errors.name is present, then we show the user an error. The same thing we'll do for email field as well. So this one would be errors.email. If errors.name or errors.email is present, then just error is set to true. So yeah, it becomes red. So now we need to show the user the error text as well. So let us add another prop. It would be called error text. Let me just copy it from here. So error text would be errors.email.message. errors.email.message, and the same thing for name as well. It will be errors.email.name. So the one problem errors.name.message. So the one problem that we might face here is, yeah, this one, cannot read property message of undefined. What if there are no errors for name, right? So when we render it, there is no error. So we need to check if errors.name exists. If it does, then we show the message, right? So we'll just use optional chaining here to see that okay, if there are any errors, then we show it, otherwise we do not, right? It says cannot property message of undefined. That should be fine. If I refresh it, it still says cannot read property. No, I think it should go after email. So if errors.email exist, then we'll check the message. I think yeah, that should solve our problem. Okay, that is done. Now when I click on submit, it says name is required and email is required, which is exactly what we are looking for. Okay, we are going to add another validation, and that is for email. What we're going to do is it will be a pattern validation. So we'll check our email with a regex and see if it indeed is a valid email or it's a bogus email. So for that we have pattern, we have a value for pattern which would be the email X. That's not something which we have in our app, we'll need to get it there, but yeah, let's just put it there for now. Email is invalid. Okay, so we need to get a email regex. So that's something which I already have in another app that I tried, so I'll just copy it and paste it. I got it from Stack Overflow, you can get it too. So yes, this is the email regex that we have, and it says email is invalid. So now we're going to try that as well. So let me try with a bogus email and see if that works. Okay, it says email is invalid, which is exactly what I want. Now when I give a proper email, that works for me. Okay, so now that we have got a name and email field, and we have also added validation to it, as in one was the basic validation where we just check whether the fields are filled, and then the other validation is where we check whether it's a valid email, right? So now what we are going to do is we might have in apps certain cases where we pre-populate forms, as in if this were an edit profile page, these values would be pre-filled, right, and not something which the user would enter. If I have a profile, I click on it, it opens the page with these values pre-filled, right? So that's what we're going to do. We are going to fetch some data from a server and then populate our form with the data that we get from the server. Okay, let's do that. For that I'm going to use JSON placeholder. So this is a fake API. By fake I mean it gives you dummy data from a server. So we are going to fetch a user from it. So we have the users API, we just need one user, so I'm going to get it. So this is the API that we will be hitting in our app. So okay, so I'll create a function which will be called fetch users, and there I would make a request to get that specific user and then use that value to populate our forms. So yeah, let me create it. It will be fetch user, and this is the API endpoint that we have, and let me check what we have. We have name and email, so that is what we are going to get from it. It will be name and email. So let me also put it inside a try catch block in case it fails. Excuse me. So yeah, now that we have it, it says there's an error. Okay, it has to be an async function, and we need to call fetch user inside use effect. So let's do that. So we don't need to do anything else. So yeah, that should do it. Use effect is probably undefined. Yes. So okay, so now when we mount, when the component is mounted, it's it's an error. Okay, it's because it was not refreshed. So now when the component is mounted, we are able to fetch the name and email from our external resource. So what we need to do now is set these values to our form, for which there is a pretty simple function which we get from React Hook Forms. It is called set value. So the way set value works is we can say set value, and the first field would be the name of the first parameter will be the name of the form field, and the second parameter is the value. So it would be name and name, and for the second one it will be email and email. That is what we are looking at. So yeah, that's where we are. So our form values, our form fields are pre-filled with these values whenever we mount. So these are pre-filled data. So that's how. If we try to make some changes to it and if we submit, let me make something else, and when I try to submit, so yeah, that's how it is. So we can get pre-filled data and we can change it. So for that we have the set value function from use form. So yes, that's there. So we have covered validation, we have covered editing pre-filled forms. So the next thing which we'll do is we'll have conditional fields. By conditional fields I mean that when I toggle this switch on and off, this is being handled by my local state here. You can see I have a value called is billing different, and when this goes true or false, these fields are shown or hidden. So ideally what we want to do is control this. This control should also be inside of our React hook forms, and then based on the change of this value we render these two fields. Okay, so for that we'll do something very similar to the other examples. Basically every React hook form component has to be inside a controller. So let's wrap switch inside a controller as well. So we have got a controller. So here the name would be is billing different. So I hope the spelling is correct. Yes, it is. So okay, this is the name that we have, and we have the render function, which is something I'll just copy because I don't want to mess up the syntax while I'm recording a video. But yeah, we have got switch on value change would be on change, and value would be the value that we have here. Okay, that should do it. We have name, and it also needs a default value. The default value would be false. Yes, I think that should do it, unless okay we need to pass control as well. So control, not control, control would be control. So there we are. We have two switches, we don't need both of them, so the second one I'll just remove. So now we just have one switch, so it's getting turned on and off, but then these values are not like this value. This is billing different value is still being controlled from our local local state, and that's not something which we're using anymore. Also this toggle billing function, this function is also not being used again, so we'll just remove it. This will let it be for a while because the page will crash if I remove it. But yeah, so now what we need to do is we need to watch this value for any changes so that I can render the remaining two fields, right? So that's pretty simple. By simple I mean there's another function that they have, it's called watch. So what we can do with watch is we can tell them that these are the values I need you to watch when they change, so that I can do my calculation based on this, or whatever I need to do based on changes. So this is how we do it. So let us define a variable. It would be is billing different, and this will be I'll watch for is billing different, right? So this is the name that I have given to my form input, so that's what it will check. So I think I can remove this state value now, and that should work as expected now when I set it to true. Okay, now that you see is billing different is watching the value, and then when it turns to true, then we already have that condition where if it's true we render the other two fields. Yeah, I think that does it. So the only thing left for us to do is for billing name and billing email to be wired up to the hook form. So for that I'm just going to copy the example that we have for name and email so that we don't mess it up anymore. So we have input placeholder would be billing name, name would be billing name, and here message would be billing name is required, right? Anything else? Errors dot, wherever we have name, it would be billing name. I hope I got the spelling correct. Yes, I did. So yes, that's it for billing name. So I'll do the same for billing email as well. So let me just copy it. So wherever I have billing name, it would be billing email. Billing email is required. We'll need another rule here, that's for the pattern rule. So that's something which you're going to do, but let me just fix it here. Anything else? Nothing, right? Yeah, I think that should be it. The last thing which we need to add is the pattern rule that we had. So the value would be email regex and message would be invalid email. I have a typo there, but yes. So now that we have it, okay, it's still rendering even though it should not, because it is set to false. Okay, that was because of hot reload. It was still persisting the old state, old form state. So yeah, now we have got our name. So let me try a new name and a new email. So now when I say new email, it should fail here, saying it's an invalid email. So that's what it's doing. Let me say valid@email.com, and when I try to submit, yes, that's what we have. So we have is billing different, this value is true. So if we remove it and then we try to submit, the form is still getting submitted. The is billing different value is false, and we don't see the other two fields. So yeah, that is it for this video. I hope it was of use to you. So for me it was very useful, because with working with forms has always been a kind of a sore point for me. So after React hook forms, it becomes very easy for me. So yeah, I hope it was useful for you. Thank you.